Okay, welcome all to the next edition of Leon's Library, a live talk show that features special guests from time to time, contributors, if you will, that weigh in on the issues of our day. And in particular, we're focused on court corruption, parental rights, parent-child alienation, and child abuse. Issues of our day that are being highly suppressed, very little coverage by the media, and really treated on a case-by-case basis, in which the greater silent epidemic, as I have called it in my recently published book, this silent epidemic is being allowed to grow and cause a real detriment to our society in all areas. This Leon's Library program is sponsored by the Citizen Commission Against Corruption. It's a not-for-profit corporation organized under laws of the state of New York. And this past year, we were granted 501c3 status by the IRS, which means we are tax exempt, and all contributions made to the CCAC, of course, are a tax benefit to you who want to invest and donate. We need those sorts of investments and donations because our goal is to travel around the country, showing up at different courts, meeting with victims of court corruption, studying, researching their cases, and issuing reports to the proper authorities. The CCAC is essentially a shadow commission for those oversight agencies that are not doing their job. We've seen too many examples of it on prior editions of this show. I cited such examples as the Moreland Commission on Public Corruption, which the ex-governor Andrew Cuomo had sponsored in 2003 that was prematurely dissolved. I've got an incoming call already. The number here is area code 315-796-4000, and we'll take this call. Go ahead. You're on Leon's Library. Go ahead.
How you doing? This is Eric.
Hey, Eric Sinderman, right? Do I got the last name right?
You do have it right. How are you? How have you been?
Good, Eric. I'm glad you joined our show. This is your first entry here. Is that right?
It is, yes.
And I'm glad to have you on board because you were one of the people that gave a rousing presentation on the back lawn of the U.S. Capitol back in 2019, our 3-day Parent March on Washington. And you participated in all the events, had a lot to contribute. And I think you came all the way in from Illinois. Is that right?
I did.
Yeah. So, before we take in your comment or whatever you're offering as far as the current events might be, what was your take, Eric, on that event? I've asked many others what they thought of it. What did you think of the Parent March on Washington?
Well, I appreciated it. It's not the first event I've been to. I think what made yours or that Parent March, what made it unique from other ones that I've seen, I really appreciated the organization and just the dividing up into teams and to make an honest impact on the legislators as well as others, of different rank and whatnot. Whether we actually went to the vice president's house one time. Not that that was anything, great, and it didn't bring a lot of attention. But still, the point was we were there, and the vice president actually knows who we are and stuff. And so I think back to the legislative element when we were able to go down to, we divided into teams, and like I say, we pretty much covered the 535 the legislature, and then
the Congress. Yeah, we did. We hit, I think, every office as far as I know. We had meetings as well. I know the New York contingent packed the chambers of then Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. He's currently the Majority Leader, and we distributed reports, and he had 3 staffers that took vigorous notes and were simply not aware of this epidemic. They were quite surprised to hear about it, to learn about it, and we had hoped to get more response from them and something underway by now. This is more than 2 years later. And of course, the pandemic hit. That prevented us from having our second annual march, which, as you know, we planned on doing in 2020. 2021 fell victim to the same thing. I actually got a contact from the one of the 4 police agencies there that we had to get permits from. And I think it was the Metropolitan Police. In any event, contacted me on whether we were going to have one in 2021 and indicating there could be some problems getting those permits given, all of their restrictions and, of course, the events that took place in January 6th and all of the things that were occurring. But it was nice to get that kind of contact because they did give us a police escort down Pennsylvania Avenue. It was a 2-mile stretch. 3 miles were set aside, or 3 lanes of that 2-mile stretch was set aside for us as we progressed. And at one point, I'm sure you'll recall that 6 lanes were set aside so we could cross over and get to the Supreme Court. But we and we had the expert speakers the night before. We had the lobby day all day on the middle day. And then behind the Capitol, after the march had concluded at the Supreme Court steps, we held an open mic session with anybody that had something to say. And I know you were one of them. We actually critiqued that march on Thursday's edition. So it's a 2-hour stretch because the second hour was devoted to that event. Steve Boyd, who also led the Candlelight Vigil, spoke very highly of it. And he was our featured guest last Wednesday. He's head of the Gabriella Boyd Foundation. As you, I think, recall, his daughter, 2-year-old daughter, was murdered by the mom rather than give up custody to the father, and she's now doing a life sentence. She was also charged with assaulting the police officers, trying to murder them, actually, with a knife when they arrived on the scene. So Steve formed a foundation. I was a guest speaker, one of 2 attorneys at his gala a couple of Saturdays ago in New Rochelle. Very well attended, some 100+ people, shirt and tie and all of that formality. And he, I guess, raised a lot of funds. And he tells me in a very recent phone conversation that he's engaged in some very serious litigation. His trial court proceedings with a very qualified attorney. I met him, sat at the table with him, wonderful guy. He's well into his 60s or early 70s, so he's got a lot of litigation experience, but they were not successful, as Steve explained, at the trial court level. He sued, I think, a number of judges, law enforcement officials who failed to act in a timely fashion, thereby costing the life of his daughter. And now they're on appeal. So that's the update on that situation. But in any event, we obviously heard your presentation last week, and it was a summary one because Attorney DeMarco out of Philadelphia came down, was very impressed with everything, and did a 15-minute video, and that's what we played last week. But so now we're trying to maybe have another event in Washington. Any ideas on what we could do or what you might? I mean, you've been around a long time. Tell us a little bit about your background, Eric. I know you've been at this for many, many years, and you're still involved. That's impressive, as so many that I have come to know over the years. Tell us a little bit about yourself, why you got involved, and where you think we're going.
Well, yeah, before I go there, I'd like to just add a little to when you mentioned the event there. The gentleman lost, the daughter there. It never ceases to amaze me wherever we go to these events and do things, how many people come out of the walkways and wherever, and come up and offer support, condolences, share their stories. And I'm always just absolutely enamored at just how many people are ill affected by this whole, we'll just call it an arena, because there's different facets to it. But you talk about filicide. I knew nothing about filicide until just a few years ago myself.
Yeah, me too. Yep.
I think the number's like over 500 in the United States alone annually. And that, to me, is just staggering. But yeah, as far as me getting involved, sadly, I, kind of typical, I think how a lot of us do, is I went through a divorce, and immediately upon my divorce, my kids were taken from me, and, no grounds. In fact, children emphatically stated they wanted to be with their dad and not their mom because of certain situations. But we'll just say government officials, because it's every element of it. The law enforcement, you're dealing with judiciary. You've got, I don't think what a lot of people realize, there's a lot of corporations, a lot of individual private corporations that profit big time off of this. And even though they may appear to be a court entity of some sort, they're actually just private profiteers off of this. And so specifically in my case, it was in the state of Michigan, an organization called Friends of the Court. And, you know, out of their own mouth, whatever women want, women get. And, you know, I went against, you know, I had my kids taken from me. I don't know if you know, I don't think anybody's ever had this to this date. I was awakened at 5 o'clock in the morning by a phone call at the motel. I was at a motel because I had my children with me, and we had an eye doctor's appointment for my youngest boy. And so we were at a motel because it was 4 or 5 hours away from home. And I get a phone call to move a van, you know, my van. And so when I got up to go do it, as soon as I opened the door, I had 2 officers right outside my motel room with their weapons drawn at me.
They had their weapons drawn at the time? They had them drawn?
What's that?
They had their weapons drawn?
Yeah, he drew his weapon.
Wow.
He screamed, "Don't do it, Mr. Cinderman." So as soon as he screamed that, I jumped out into the open so that anybody and everybody who's watching could see I wasn't doing anything.
Well, what is it they thought you were going to do? What did your ex allege that made them feel you were so dangerous?
So let me tell you what happened. As soon as I walk out and you know, I get handcuffed and I get taken down the stairs. I mean, it's an indoor hallway of a 2-story hotel. And I get walked down the stairs, and as I'm walking out, I'm counting. I had 24 plus police officers out there from 4 or 5 different agencies, and they took me into custody. And I had come to find out that they put an APB out for me, that he's an ex-Marine, he's an ex-police officer, and he knows weapons. He's considered armed and dangerous. Those are the exact wording that was gone, you know, there. So they bring me into the station, and I still don't know what's going on until an investigator comes in. The investigator comes in, and she lays down divorce papers, and she says, "Sign them." And
sign them.
Word exchange. You know, I refuse to sign them. Blah blah blah. Said, you know, look at it. It's been ripped apart, restapled. But yeah, I was just brought in. I was arrested simply to be ordered to sign divorce papers. And at that point, they didn't know what to do with the kids. And there's no court order, nothing. And they decided to take the kids from me, even though the kids are crying and, no, we don't want to go with mom, we want to stay with dad, blah, blah, blah. And this is all on video. This is all inside their booking room and cameras and everything. But yeah, now that began my whole world. It was July 29th, 2006. And no, that wasn't July, but July 29th, 2006 is when it introduced me to this whole arena.
Wow. So you've been around for what, 15 years, attending all these events and rallies. And what have you seen over all those years? It's about the same amount of time I've been involved in my divorce process, which I guess is still ongoing, depending how you want to look at it. You know, started in 2004. I know one of our guests, Dr. Anthony Pappas, his divorce started the same year. That one's still ongoing. These protracted divorces, according to the 2006 Matrimonial Commission report to the New York Chief Justice, they made it clear that the longer that you drag these cases out, the uglier they get, the more violent they get, and the more damage that they cause. And, you know, like I've been really a big proponent of ending this parental alienation, which is a tactic for getting custody. And it's also a form of revenge that has been used to exploit the system, harm the children, and permanently separate moms and dads from their children, one or both parents. And yet at the border, we're giving all this attention to the separation of parents from their children who are here illegally, committing violations of the law to get here and even crimes. And yet there's all this concern over them. And on a routine basis across America, parent alienation is taking hold. There was one comment from a caller last week who emphasized that I think it was the attorney, if I'm not mistaken, that we had the attorney from Florida. And I think she commented that they're not even acknowledging parent alienation, that you can raise it, you can try to prove it, but they just dismiss it because that would bring in a lot of the fault element, the dysfunction, if you will, of the process as a whole. I'm a victim of parental alienation. And, they don't really lay that out. I call it as human rights violation. Dr. Richard Gardner came up with it back in the 80s as a psychological syndrome, problem, and the psychiatric industry never accepted his theory as one of the syndromes that are documented in the DSM-5 manual, which is what they use to diagnose people with conditions, and they never accepted that one. And my argument has been, since I got involved, that parent alienation is a human rights violation. And that's really an accurate depiction of what is occurring, and that the harm that's done is the damage as a result of what I would consider and have argued to be a tort, a violation of civil law such that you should be compensated. But then you get into judicial immunity and how they're protected. You get state immunities. You get all these technical obstacles, which I've raised time and again in my own case, Parent versus State, which was decided in 2011, a 45-page decision. We took it right up to the Supreme Court. There was a rally that was conducted in favor of that lawsuit at the Federal Appeals Court in Manhattan. I know some of our regular contributors, one of the members of our CCAC, came to those events, and we've had support, but not nearly enough. We need donations and contributions. We need people to subscribe to Leon's Library, for example, build up to subscription and get to a point where we can then be a voice for victimized parents. But parent alienation is a very serious human rights violation that's not being acknowledged. And it causes such severe emotional distress. I know from my own experience that it causes such every morning you wake up wondering, where your children are, what my daughters are doing, are they safe? Do they need my help? Do they need me? What anything that's going on in their life, and you're totally blacked out. This is a modern day creation. It's a modern day phenomenon, and one that is so lucrative for those who deal with this antiquated, custody visitation law, or should I say framework for child rearing, that I don't know that there's going to be any reform anytime soon. Shared parenting is opposed by the bar associations, the special interests that profit from this. And so the last thing you want children and parents to be remanded to is a court of law. The last thing you need is to put lawyers in the mix and get them fighting and influencing their clients to raise the stakes and harm the other parent, attack them, again, not in family and divorce courts. And the other forms of litigation, we can make the case, criminal cases and so forth. We have an adversarial process, truth-seeking as they call it, but that's not the case in family court or divorce, because parents will do anything to save their time with their children. And perjury is going on all the time. They can never hold those people accountable, because we would fill our jails. And what strikes me, Eric, and I'm sure you're out in the Midwest, so you're close to those events out there in Wisconsin. I mean, here we have a man that is multiple felony offender on charges in Colorado and elsewhere, and he was allowed out on a $1,000 bail, and earlier on a $500 bail, so that he could go out and run over people at that Christmas parade, an event that was just an atrocity. And meanwhile, while that kind of thing is going on, the catch and release that's going on in New York and California and Massachusetts and other states, we're allowing these criminals out in the streets, and they're causing all sorts of chaos, carnage, and harm with impunity. And yet parents who lose a job, or simply not able to pay child support, or simply because they're denied contact with their children, don't find any logic to supporting the substitute parents that come in and are supported by that money. It's a pay-to-parent scandal, so to speak. So they're not paying support. You go over the state lines with a $5,000 support debt, and you could be charged with a felony. Even though you're looking for a job or and so forth. So we're locking debtors, creating a debtor prison. They call it child support. And that's a nice sounding word, because then people say, oh, yeah, you got to support your children. Well, wait a minute here. Okay. We got rid of debtor prisons a long time ago. It was declared unconstitutional. And here we are. We brought it in through the back door, and we're locking people up for 6 months at a time, which is routine in New York. And meanwhile, these dangerous felons are being allowed out on a mere $1,000 bail. A drug dealer could get that very quickly. And they're going out and literally killing innocent people in a shocking display of carnage. And you can't reconcile that. I have a gentleman that I represented many years ago, and he ended up falling behind in his child support. He supported our cause, got involved with us, and then he was forced to give up parental rights to his daughter in order to not go back to jail for another 6 months because he couldn't pay the child support. So he gave up the rights to his daughter. It totally devastated him. I know, because I was around him when he took the calls and had to set up that arrangement and give up those rights under coercion and pressure to stay out of jail. And he took his life this past October, age 46. We see this kind of suicide, murder-suicide. The victims are everywhere, and they are not giving it the attention it deserves. It is an epidemic. I've been looking for a documentary for years. One of the reasons why I'm still here. I mean, the targeting. I've been notified by Gmail. I've been notified by Facebook. I've been notified by WordPress. The people who host events like this, the sites that host, like, for example, Leon's Library, leonkoziol.com, which has been around since 2010. And I'm being notified that I need to change my password because people are trying very recently, within the past few days, past week or so, to try to interfere with my presentations, trying to interfere with my sites. And of course, we've seen the interferences here. I've done nothing different than yesterday. And here we are live without a problem. Everything's working fine. So there is interference, and where it's coming from or whatever, time will tell. My goal has been, let's get a Justice Department investigation and hearings before oversight committees in Congress. And then maybe we'll see change. If we get an investigation, as you know, Eric, we demanded that during our march down, the 2-mile march down Pennsylvania Avenue. And in our reports, our goal was to get the federal government investigating the abuses of federal funds in these courts. They're taking money from the federal government and they're turning around and committing human rights violations and then suppressing it, retaliating and censoring people like me. And there's just too much evidence of it to ignore any longer. So I'm back in the fray. I did not throw in the towel despite all the pressures over 11, 12 years of targeting and a heck of a lot of pain in being separated from my precious daughters. And I'm trying to reconnect during the holidays. I don't know what's going to come of that. But the ex-wife, who's now remarried, just remarried, is just an energizer bunny. She is the revenge, the anger, the hatred that exists in that person to brainwash and alienate my daughters from me when we had the first 12 years were just wonderful. The events we went, Disney World, weekends on Lake George, mountain climbing, so many, educational excursions, cheerleading events, the list goes on. And sure. Especially during the holidays. And we do need that investigation. So my goal is to continue building up the following. Let's get to subscribers. Let's have another event in Washington. It doesn't have to be 3 days. We don't even have to have a march, but I do think we need to lobby again. I know with the January 6th, what they call insurrection, it might be difficult to access Congress. We were, I guess, fortunate, Eric, to get in when we did because we traveled. We had all the buildings of Congress and the Capitol. And of course, we were a peaceful, non-confrontational 3-day event. We had expert speakers. We had all, parent advocates and representatives from all over the country. And yet, they say, well, we only approve of peaceful protests and not violent ones like we've seen with BLM and so forth. And they're up in Saratoga. There's a lot of news on that, which I gave out at a prior show here. And we're not getting any attention. We're not getting not even an inquiry. That's shocking. So we do have to organize. If we get the investigation, the oversight hearings, then everybody can bring their ordeals. We can't focus on just one or a few situations. We have to all unite, moms and dads, victims, families, children that have grown up and become adults and experienced all of this. I've seen women in tears. I took some calls this week of women who just broke down on the phone with me and encouraged me to stay involved. even though there's very little incentive for me to do so any longer. My daughters are in college now.
Sure.
I've said a lot there, Eric. What do you think about all of that?
Well, I think to your point,
And by the way, before you go on, everybody who are listening or checking, the number here is area code 315-796-4000. If you want to call in, again, 315-796-4000. That number has been on our website. It's in the notices for every one of these shows. And it was back up in yesterday's notice for today's show. So it is there. And again, if you want to call in on any topic, feel free to do so. Go ahead, Eric.
I was going to say, to cover kind of a few of the things you mentioned there, it is dumbfounding to see how blatant it really is. But I think what I have learned from it, if I could share one thing that, preceded this, is way back, I got sent to the Middle East with Marines and during the Gulf War and stuff. And
well, thank you for your service.
What's that?
Thank you for your service.
Oh, well, I wasn't fishing, but well, thank you. But what I was going there was just before that, I had a very intimate conversation with a U.S. congressman. I had helped get reelected a number of times. I was involved in the political arena, getting the senator and all. And he asked myself and one other person to stand back during a large fundraising event after all the donors and everybody left. He had taken myself and this gentleman down to the bar, and he trusted us, and he shared quite a bit of information. We didn't know we didn't know what the Middle East was going to bring. We just knew we were going over, and he confided a lot in us. And I can share this now because the congressman is dead, so I don't have to worry about him. But he opened my eyes. He opened my eyes to a lot of things which up until that time were nothing but conspiratory stuff. Some of it's, I'm very careful of what I take in because I realize both sides of the fence and everywhere in between, everybody exaggerates and blows it, whatever. But he laid out some very solid information that actually just got verified and over the years and came to fruition. He gave names of people and powers and stuff. And then, of course, going over to the Middle East, you get an announcement of a new world order for the first time in world history publicly and stuff like that. And I share that not to go down the bunny trail of that, but what I found was as I got involved in this, the whole parental rights thing, children's rights and so on, it's amazing to me the division that is in our government over this. You mentioned how the one police agency had contacted you. I think that alone is kind of a courtesy to, reach out and say, hey, are you guys going to be doing it? They really didn't even have to do that. And I have found that the Metro Police in D.C. and Park, and like you said, I forget what it is. It's something like 56 agencies in a 5 square mile or something like that.
I had to get 4 permits for all of our events from the we had, of course, the rally that started in front of the White House at Lafayette Park. There have been a lot of events since our event then,
Sure.
That we've seen in the news, with BLM and everything else. And then we had to get another permit from the Metropolitan Police to go down. They gave us the police cars and the motorcycles to go, escort us down Pennsylvania Avenue. And then there was the Capitol Park Police and then Secret Service. So we had to get 4 permits for all those different venues.
Sure.
Even the Capitol, even the concluding event, the candlelight vigil in front of the Capitol on the last night, Friday evening, we had to get a permit for that. Where you spoke, for example, behind the Capitol, the opposite side of the Capitol building in the afternoon, and it was a gorgeous day, and we had to get a permit for that. So you're right, Eric. And to see that they were welcoming that they would call to see if we were doing this again this year. That, as you say, that tells you we had a very respectable event, and that they were willing to accommodate us again, as long as, of course, we followed protocols, which we did. And it was not a single event. There was no, as you know, Eric, you were there all those days. There was nothing. There wasn't, sure, we had the chance going down Pennsylvania Avenue, but it's common to everything, to all kinds of protests. All right, I got another incoming call, so let me take this call. I'm going to put you on hold, okay, Eric, or you can always call back, all right? Okay. Go ahead. You're on Leon's Library.
Hello. Thanks for having me on. This is Theodore Chino.
Oh,
Leon,
Ted, how are you?
I first
Ted,
very
you're,
good.
yeah,
And
you're
hello
new.
to everyone out there. I watched a few of your shows that were recorded. I was referred to you by someone else who was kind of a crusader in this arena, and I want to also just extend my heart out to everyone and their children who have been damaged by these hyenas that call themselves officers of the family court. Now, not all of them are horrible individuals. I think a lot of them don't even know they're doing anything bad anymore.
Now, Ted, just for some background, you're from where? California, right?
No, actually a little outside of Chicago.
Okay, just want to make sure we got your location. Go ahead, Ted. Ted's new to our program, his first appearance, but he called me a couple days ago, impressed with what we're doing. I'm glad to hear he found it useful enough to get involved. And the more we get involved, the better off we're going to be. And so these videos that we're doing are reproduced on Leon's Library YouTube. And you can check any one of them out. Some of them I have to get rid of because there may be too many there. But one like this one, is going to be around a while. So people check in as Ted did, and they find it's something that we need to join. And I'm glad to have you aboard, Ted. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, thank you. Yeah, feel free to jump in anytime. But yeah, like Mr. Zimmerman, I believe. I mean, I hear stories like that. I talked to you, Leon. I heard Dr. Pappas's story, and in a weird way, like your stories make me feel better because I thought I went through the ringer and I went through an ordeal. And wow, you guys, I mean, what you've been through and what you're still going through. My heart goes out to you. And again, not to force God on anybody, but God, I like to just share with everybody. I believe God's good. We're only here for a little tiny, just a little dot in time. And while we're here together, try to be good to each other. Try to be nice to each other. Even people who don't want to believe in God probably would agree that that's a good thing to do. Most good people anyway. And there are a lot of bad things going on in the world right now. There are a lot of terrible things, horrific things that make what we've been through look like just puppies and candy canes, right? But here's what happened is, for whatever reason, we've gone through what we went through for lots of reasons, and we were put in the spot we're in, and we were given a certain amount of energy and a certain amount of time and a certain amount of skills and talents. I've been in HR for over 20 years now, and that does not make me a good person. That does not make me a perfect person. That does not make me even a smart person compared to everyone. But I've seen a lot of stuff, a lot of good behavior and a whole lot of bad behavior in human beings at every level of an organization, regardless of their education level or lack thereof. And, just maturity. You would think certain people, that person's a judge, that person's a doctor, that person's a lawyer. They would never do something like that. Well, this is what I want to share with you all, because I've been trying to, my little one actually made me a poster. She comes to work with me on Mondays because the judge was good enough to let my children see their father nearly every Monday. And it's a little tricky because Dad has to work, but she made this poster for me, and I'm trying to find it while we talk now, but I didn't know she was doing it. And I went into my office later on when she wasn't there anymore, and I almost cried tears of joy because, just some of these things that you'll hear from children are just amazing. They'll kind of reset you. But she basically, in the very beginning, she said on the poster, always think outside the box. So, we've been conditioned and trained to just accept things. Well, what I want to do is take you all back to times that weren't so, I guess they weren't in a lot of ways nearly as good as they are today. You might have been just going to get some water with your family by a river. And then, no offense to descendants of Vikings, maybe a bunch of Vikings would have came through and stolen your children and burned down your village, right?
Yeah, that
I'm
was
sure
going on
that
all
was
over the
not-
world,
that wasn't
every
done.
race. Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, horrible things like that are going on right now as we speak, right? But now let's talk about kidnappers and ransom. Well, I'm going to make the argument that most family courts and most officers of the family court, as they like to call themselves, these hyenas, are actually not as honorable as most kidnappers and Vikings and seekers of ransom are. Because think about this for a second. What is their objective? Their objective is to get money from you. But when you give them the money, what are you supposed to get? You're supposed to get your children back. You're supposed to get more time with your children. Now, compare that to the system we have set up today where, hey, guess what you're going to get? You're going to get less time or no time with your children. And because we are ordaining less time or no time with your children, you are going to pay us more. And that is more oppressive than what a marauding Viking, or you name any other, bunch of marauding barbarians seeking ransom, thieves. I mean, that is more oppressive than what they have done to people in the past.
Well, Ted, I've compared this antiquated custody system to the Roman Colosseum. They put the children there, and they have mom and dad come out and fight over those children in a public arena. I mean, that is what's going on in these courthouses. You're coming in to a very public arena. Anybody can, you can come in and sit down on these things now, get permission to court. They got to let them in. You can get transcripts. You're in a public arena, and you're being humiliated, and you're out to destroy one another. In my case, we got along great for the 2 years of separation. The 3 years of marriage were not as good as our separation, but we got along. I mean, we survived. There were no incidents, no reports, nothing like that. And we even tried to reconcile. Okay. But as soon as the lawyers got involved, and I warned her not to do it, but she thought this was just a neat thing because she could get my goat or whatever she was thinking, deranged or whatever. But once the lawyers got involved, and then they appoint a lawyer for the children. The children don't know what this lawyer's doing. How could a lawyer know what to do on behalf of a 6, 7, or 8-year-old, little girl and her sister? And in my case, this guy was just a complete creep. He'd never been married, no children, well into his 60s, and this was his lifeblood. To go into courts, create all kinds of controversy, and use such words as terrorizing. Dad is terrorizing his children. Where do people come up with these nonsensical words? We see a lot of that today on both sides of the political spectrum, where the more volatile depictions that they can come up with, they know that's going to attract attention and the media jumps on it. And it's going on all the time in divorce and family courts. We should hold lawyers accountable. You want to use the word terrorist, you better back that up. That person had better be somebody that either tried to fly a plane into a building or can be verifiably affiliated with a terrorist group. But to use that against a parent who's there because he or she loves the child and wants to spend more time maybe or whatever, or protect the child, that is horrific. And it's going on all the time. And the judges, they like to call them judges, but let's face it, I've said it time again, these are lawyers in robes. They did all the same things. They're not being held accountable. My custody judge, I moved to have him removed from my case because he was way too politically involved. He had faced a civil rights lawsuit in federal court brought by his own clerks because he had been using them, directing them to spy on his political judge opponents. And the clerks refused to do it. The chief clerk, she sued him and she won $600,000. So I said, well, you can't be on my case. I ran for Senate. We're opposite political parties. You have to get off my case. And the lawyers in the courtroom ridiculed me. The quote I like to use is, this judge was a judge without reproach, a reputation without reproach. And how could Mr. Koziol challenge him? How could he even raise the motion? This is absurd. This is terrible. And then, within months of, and the judge did step off my case, fortunately, because they have what's called the Lincoln hearing in New York. They have the counterpart hearings throughout the country where the children are brought into chambers and the judge, queries them, asks them things, would you like mom? They actually ask, do you like mom? Do you like dad? And it's a terrible situation. And then the parents are kept out. They're not allowed in chambers as this judge interrogates their child or children. And fortunately, my girls didn't have to go into chambers with that particular judge. He did remove himself from the case. His name is Brian Hedges, Bryan Hedges, Hedges. And he was permanently banned from holding judicial office by the High Court of New York because shortly after my case, he admitted to sexual abuse of his handicapped 5-year-old niece. Now, you got to look at all those noun modifiers. Handicapped, she's only 5 years old. She couldn't possibly know what was going on. And if you're a relative, a niece, you're given the trust that the family routinely gives to an uncle who then as a judge, was forced to step down. And so, and his replacement was a judge that was also forced to resign because he was found guilty by a judicial commission of sexually harassing his court clerks. So I could go on and on. The judge who replaced him, he was given a public censure by the Judicial Conduct Commission of New York because he was making physical threats from the bench and using racist slurs, in the courtroom. And so these are judges should never be in a robe. And we have to look at that because there's a lot of that. The Kids for Cash scandal in Pennsylvania, Judge Wade McCree having an adulterous relationship with one of the woman litigant in a support case, lambasting the dad while he's having sex in chambers and gets her pregnant. And the father sues, and the federal courts ruled that particular judge had judicial immunity. And I've raised the question, are you serious? Is adultery in chambers now truly a protected judicial act? That's the conclusion. That's the question that comes out. So we have this going on all over the country. The Operation Greylord in Chicago, almost 100 law enforcement officials, public officials, lawyers, and judges were arrested and convicted in a federal state sting operation. That's what I'm saying we need today. And because the corruption has gotten out of control and we are the victims, and we will continue to be the victims until we join and then demand this in a peaceful way, in a productive American way, as our Constitution, First Amendment, and our rights guarantee of us. People like Eric Sinderman, who as a Marine went overseas to fight for our rights and then became victimized, as he explained shortly. So that's my take on that, Ted. So you want to add to that or anything else you want to say?
Yeah. No, Leon, something you said. I mean, look at that. You and your ex were trying to work things out together, but as soon as you got the lawyers involved, so I'd like to share another analogy with everyone here is, think of the courthouse as a hospital. Think of the lawyers as the family law lawyers as paramedics, and some of them as doctors, right? Well, I mean, whatever happened between you and your ex, or me and mine, or whoever else is watching this, whether they be male, female, whatever the story was.
It's in the past now. Yeah, you can't change. Yeah, you can't turn back the clock in time.
So, you're kind of like a paramedic is driving down the road and they see someone all mangled up. The paramedic didn't cause this, but they pull over and they're supposed to do what? They're duty bound, they're oath bound to do as much good to make the person better, stabilize them as possible.
Save their life, sure.
Instead, these lawyers, I mean, if we had paramedics acting like these officers of the family court, these family law lawyers, what these paramedics would do is pull over and drop a bunch of elbows on you and take your wallet and then blame you for making them stop and beat you up and charge you for the bloody shirt that they have now because they beat you up and they had blood on their elbows, right? So this is what they do is they stir up, like you said, they pit you against each other. Like, I know a guy whose ex told him, do what I say or else the judge will make you do what I say. And this guy told her, I don't think that's how it works. And then this guy's ex was promised lots of things. And guess what? She didn't get all these things that this lawyer promised her. And this lawyer was, he was a perverted brained scumbag, and he's horrible as a lawyer. He's actually not only a terrible human being who's very messed up, and maybe what we need to have some sort of mechanism in place where if any of the litigants feel like one of the lawyers, especially GALs, guardian ad litems, and even judges are mentally unstable, that they get to pick some sort of psychologist who can do some sort of analysis on these people to see if they are unstable, because a lot of them these courtrooms are kind of a playground.
Well, let me stop you there for a minute,
egos.
Ted. Let me stop you there for a minute, because you really stumbled upon an interesting point, because you would not be aware of reports that I've issued and posts that go back many years. But I put out a post back, I think it was 2013 or 2014, after experiencing the series of judges that some of which I just outlined, okay, and the horrific events and being removed from the bench for pedophilia and racism and so forth.
Right.
I actually, because what these judges were doing, and by the way, Governor Kathy Hochul of New York is now in the midst of a commission that she appointed or continued, a commission on forensic custody evaluations. This commission is a blue ribbon panel, 20 members. 17 are women. All 3 co-chairs are women. One is of those co-chairs is head of the Domestic Violence Agency of New York. And you wonder what the underlying, message is there. But in any event, they're studying these forensic evaluations to see if there are abuses occurring and what changes can be made. And I testified. It was a virtual hearing, and I mentioned it in a prior show here. I won't get into it again. But they're going to be issuing a report. And my guess, much like the Moreland Commission on Public Corruption, which ex-Governor Cuomo created in 2013, it was called a panel of a who's who experts in law enforcement, judges, lawyers from all over the state. And he dissolved that commission prematurely when testimony, I was one who testified there as well, began implicating the governor himself. The federal prosecutor, one who testified, got incensed by that. He seized the files, ended up convicting the leaders of our state legislature and the top Cuomo aide. The governor escaped liability, but look at what's going on now. He was forced to resign, and there's all sorts. The Assembly just issued a report, the New York Assembly, finding that he abused state resources to publish his $5 million book, and that he and a variety of other things. I published a book. I've mentioned this before. I'll do it again. I want to continue to promote this book because it's vital for people to read. It's just so, it's called Whistleblower in Paris by the publisher Author House. You will find it at Barnes & Noble. All the Amazon gave it a 5-star rating, all the major bookseller sites. And it brings out a great number of ordeals. Dr. Pappas is in here. And in it, I bring out the point in time where I asked that we have judges, family court judges, submit to psychological comprehensive evaluations, much like they issue against litigants. And their abuses on litigants is now the study of the governor. So it's very current. And that particular post was record following. I had over 2,000 reactions to it. Almost all of them were thumbs up. It went all over the world, actually, mostly the United States, but I have never gotten anything close to that. The suppression, the censorship of me, they put a gag order on my website. A family judge did. I had to have it removed in New York Supreme Court. Is reduced now to a following where I'm lucky I get 1 or 2 reactions to my postings. So, you're right on point there, Ted. And I raise this in my book, as I do so many other things. And the censorship of this is quite astounding. I'm going to read something that I read. I think one of the earliest 2 weeks ago, maybe I read this. But the censorship that occurs that I just referenced, and I mentioned earlier how I'm getting warnings, from Facebook and Gmail and WordPress, that there are people trying to interfere with my sites, this program, and that I need to change my passwords. I got it. I could show it to you. I don't think anybody's going to doubt me on that. But here's what one gentleman made a statement on an attorney, Larry DeMarco, did our video. of the Parent March on Washington. Nicely done, 15-minute video. You should find it. You'll see it on my website. It's viral. And attorney Larry DeMarco has a YouTube channel like mine. And apparently one of our local individuals found it and made a comment about me because somehow my name came up. Larry and I are pretty good friends. I've stayed at his home before. He's got a studio there and so forth. And we still go back and forth, share information. And he shared this statement with me. He sent it to me and he said, I think you need to be FYI. You ought to be aware of this. This particular person made a comment on my site. And I'm going to read it to you now. It's just called Just Larry. I know this individual locally. He is a former legislator. And he wanted to comment on just the kind of censorship that I was exposed to and how real it is. So here's what he writes, and I quote, I can say from roughly 20 years of experience as a former legislator and colleague of Mr. Koziol that he is hands down the best litigator I've ever witnessed. That includes TV and movies. The man is brilliant and principled. This is why the entire state of New York made it their mission to take him down. I literally witnessed senators and even congressmen say it in my presence. He was a threat because he couldn't be bought. So you see whistleblowers throughout the country that are being censored like this. There was a recent news item that came out where the Biden administration, knowing of a whistleblower, nevertheless neglected the message and only recently did that come out. And that's just within the last several days. We see whistleblowers like the gal who exposed Facebook for what they're doing that are harming children with this hate messages that were allowed to be were allowed to go viral and so forth. And she was featured on 60 Minutes, as I was at one time. And then next thing you know, 2 days later, Congress has her in front of a subcommittee giving testimony. Now, we had our parent march way back in May 1, 2, and 3 of 2019. Here it is 2.5 years later. We have not even gotten the suggestion of a hearing or testimony that we are all prepared to give to expose this epidemic and correct it for the benefit of people, not just now, but for future generations. This is a long-term plan, but we need action now, today, yesterday, actually, because reform is long overdue. So in any event, we still have you on there, Ted?
I'm still here. You know what? I just want to thank you so much for fighting. And you know what? I've been coaching martial arts for over 30 years too.
Remind me not to mess with you.
You can't win them all. You cannot win them all. And it's okay to tap out sometimes. It's okay to skip a match. It's okay to sit out a round. But you know what? We're going to keep on getting up. We're going to keep on fighting the good fight. And there are lots of other causes out there. We've been personally damaged and affected by this. Our children. And it's really more about our children being robbed of the ability to have access to both parents as much as possible. Our children are being abused and being cut off from resources so that these other people can profit in the $60 billion plus dollar a year industry. And so what we have to do is we've been affected. We've been put in the path of this. We've been damaged. We've been a little, traumatized. And I hope everybody out there is getting therapy. And I hope everybody out there can stay in touch over the holidays because these get tough, especially if you can't see your children. I've been blessed with the chance, and my children have been blessed with the chance to see their father this Thanksgiving. But I also am sad because the children won't get to see their mother even a little bit because I wasn't able to convince her that it would be nice for us to split up the day, even though it's all my day, right? But it's not. The day belongs to the children. And so we have to get up and, we have to take it easy sometimes. We have to rest. We have to give it a break. We have to go have some fun or whatever. But we'll keep getting back up and we'll keep fighting, not only for our own kids, but for all the other kids out there who are going through this. And it's so unnecessary. There are other places in the world where they're war-torn, where there's all kinds of other things, monsoons hitting them and everything else. This is all generated by greed and the hubris of all these people who really, if they had a soul, they sold it a long time ago and are tearing up good families just for, so they can live it, have that nice little white picket fence and live in that expensive area and drive that car or whatever and show off to whoever they need to show off to. So I think the terrorization, and I will use that word, the terrorization of our families needs to stop. And we're here doing it, and Leon, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you're doing. And I know you get tired, but just, take a break every now and then, but keep coming out for that next round whenever you have the strength to do it. Thank you.
I may not ever be able to salvage. I certainly can't turn back the clock of time and get all those years I lost with my daughters during junior high and high school. It's extremely painful not knowing where they are, what's going on in their worlds, and all the dreams you had when you were growing up and getting married and doing all those things, and how the ex could even, conjure up something like this, and yet continue to perpetrate it without any sort of, morale, the depravity. It just shocks the conscience. But it's affecting everybody. We have, movie stars. We see Brad Pitt going through this. We've seen so many over the years that came and went. Jason Patrick at one time was very heavy supporting shared parenting. Then he got what he wanted, and then he disappeared. Similarly, Alec Baldwin got involved when he had the very volatile divorce going on with Kim Basinger. And he published a book, much like I did, and his book was called A Promise to Ourselves. And I was invited to his book signing in Manhattan, and he autographed this particular copy. And he writes something that we tend to forget. He's now going through a new set of crises with the Rust movie there and the shooting of these individuals, that one that died as a result. So that's going to take a while, I assume, to resolve itself. But here's what he wrote in connection with, in his book, at page 183 of his book, A Promise to Ourselves. It was published by St. Martin's Press in 2008. And I quoted this before. I'm going to quote it again because it people forget this, and how serious it is. How anybody, I don't care who you are, how famous you are, or how wealthy you are, or how poor you are, how homeless you are, this could affect you. I know a gentleman that's homeless and would come and see me in Manhattan whenever I went down. He would try to, visit with me and share his ordeal with me. And he was living out of a van, and even mapped it out for me to prove that he wasn't making it up. And he wanted time with his children that, he was denied, and ended up like that. You could end up like that. In any event, here's what he writes. My family and closest friends were still there for me, but even some of them had grown perplexed by and weary of the assault on my parental rights that seemed to have no end. On the deepest level, my situation now seemed hopeless to me as well. I had gone to sleep many nights doubting that I had a desire to face these problems another day. Driving up the Taconic Parkway, heading to an inn in the Berkshire Mountains, I began to think about what little-known town I would repair to in order to commit suicide. What semi-remote Massachusetts state park could I hike deep into and shoot myself? What bed and breakfast could I check into and overdose there? On Long Island, I thought about the old Jeep I owned and the emissions it gave off. When I returned to New York, the thought of jumping out the window of my apartment was with me every night for weeks. That's Alec Baldwin, page 183 of his book, A Promise to Ourselves. That fell to the wayside. Alec Baldwin got involved in the movement, and as quickly as he got in the fray, he left it because it's just too painful to stay involved. And even on my book, I write on the back side of it, and this is before his most recent events going on with this movie. I wrote an extraordinary read, and I open the summary of my book on the back cover as follows. When Alec Baldwin published his 2008 book, A Promise to Ourselves, his goal ostensibly was to reform our nation's broken divorce system. But as quickly as he entered the fray, he abandoned the movement altogether. For a whistleblower, it was a disillusioning exit because he crushed the hopes of divorce victims throughout the country who shared a similar vision but lacked his star power. My point being is that we are too separated. We are too disjointed among one another as victims, and we need to get together, to finally get that reformed, to obtain that special interest, if that's what you want to call it, a union, because we don't have that. Our adversaries have bar associations, they have lobby groups, they have highly paid lobbyists that are working against us, working against shared parenting, working against the exposure of corruption, whistleblowers like me that are being viciously targeted. And there are war stories like that I hear on a regular basis from all across the country. And here we have a famous person who left the movement, first vowed to be a big part of it, and then, and it was interviewed and then the major media, and then suddenly disappeared. That was, 13 years ago. And a lot's happened since. It's only gotten worse. And so we need to do something here. We have to organize. And the more people we could get to subscribe to this program, Leon's Library, the more people that we could get to donate, to underwrite. My hope is we'll find that, needle in the haystack, the diamond in the rough, the person or entity that might come in and say, hey, they're doing something here very profound. They have good leadership. We've got a wonderful board of directors with the CCAC. We've got individuals who are great organizers, and persons that are just chomping at the bit to get out there, investigate cases around the country, expose it, and get the Justice Department investigation that we need from the federal government and the oversight hearings in Congress to really bring this to the forefront such that media can no longer ignore it. So with that, I'm going to close our session today. It's going to be republished on this site. Many people will see this, long after we conclude it shortly. I will not be live again until Monday with the Thanksgiving holidays coming up. Today is Tuesday, November 23rd. We will be back again next Monday. Get your friends and relatives and fellow victims to join this program. Give us your ordeals. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you might think to have in the way of an event next year, and what we could even do now to lobby and obtain change in a meaningful, peaceful, and effective way. So I want to thank you for joining us today. And I look forward to more time, with you. And look for us on our site, Leon's Library on YouTube. And again, get more people to subscribe, get people involved so that we could finally get the change that we need. Thank you so much, and good night.